Welcome to video 4 in this marriage-based green card series. One thing you need to know is when you're filing your green card application, you're going to need an I-130 no matter if your spouse is in the US or outside of the US, you're going to need an I-130 and an I-130a. And in this video, I'm going to break down the form and what you need to know, because there's some parts of the form that if you do not get right, it's going to derail your case. So let's talk about it. Let's go through the forms and let's make sure that you are following the perfect application recipe. If you want to know what the perfect application recipe, make sure you watch my last video in this series, because I break down the recipe that I use for my clients when we're putting together their green card application. I am U.S. Immigration Attorney Lilian Chukwurah, and I have been helping my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system for almost 10 years now. So let's get into these forms so that you know what to look out for when it comes to the I-130. The first form that we are going to get into is the I-130. Remember, every single application you have with USCIS is going to start with this, right? If your spouse is outside of the US, if your spouse is inside the US, you're going to need an I-130 and an I-130a. So let's start with the I-130. The I-130 relative petition, this can be filed online by creating the USCIS online account, or on paper by mailing the application to the right USCIS lockbox with the filing fee included. If you are filing this application online, your payment will be done online. So you can make the payment with a check or a credit or debit card. Typically for our clients, we have them send us the payment and we make the payment for them, because everything is done through our attorney account, and then the client signs on their account. But the payment is made through the attorney account, and we do that for our clients. So let's get into the forms. This is the I-130. Okay, this is the petition for alien relative. So when I say alien petition, this is the form I'm talking about. The petition for alien relative, this goes to USCIS. Up here, you see all of this stuff here? You are not, okay? So all of this, you are not filling it out. That is specifically for USCIS use. This is really important to keep in mind. This right here, this whole section where it says section of law / visa category, fee stamp, all of that, you are not filling it out. Even if you know it's an IR1 or CR1, you are not filling it out. That is for USCIS use only. Okay? Now, over here, so everything under this is what you or your lawyer fills out. So we do this for our clients. Our clients are not filling out forms. They're giving us information and we are filling out the forms for them. Listen, our clients are busy. They have a life. They are not sitting there trying to learn immigration law to be able to answer these questions accurately. So that is our job, to make sure that these questions are answered accurately, and we are just getting information from the client to fill this out. So if you are working with a lawyer, this top part over here will have the lawyer's information, okay? If you are working with a legal representative, they should be filling out this box here saying that they represent you, okay? It's really important, because if they're not filling it out, then they do not represent you. Keep that in mind. So if you're paying someone to represent you and do these forms for you and make sure everything is done accurately for USCIS purposes, they should be an accredited attorney or a representative that's accredited by the Department of Homeland Security. And if they are, they will be filling this out up here. And if they're not, that is your biggest hint that they are not either accredited lawyers or accredited representative with the Department of Homeland Security. Okay. Now let's get into the questions. So the first question is, who are you filing this application for? Okay. Who are you filing this application for? Remember, you can file a spouse, parent, brother, sister, child. If you are a U.S. citizen, all these options, right? All these options are available to you if you are a U.S. citizen. If you are not a U.S. citizen, the only option, so if you're a permanent resident, the only option available to you is spouse and child. That's it. Okay. But if you're a U.S. citizen, all these options are available to you, and you can file for your spouse, your parent, your brothers and sisters, and your children. It's really important to note, though, if you are a permanent resident filing for your child, if your child is married, you cannot file for them until you become a U.S. citizen. So just keep that in mind as well. There is that limitation that your children that you're filing for as a permanent resident be unmarried. Okay. Now, next thing is, how are you related to this person? This is only for parent-child applications, okay? This is not for siblings, spouses, children, okay? This is only for parent-child, all right? So if you are a parent filing for your child, or if you're the child filing for a parent, just know USCIS is looking for you to answer these questions. See, there's a box for stepchildren. Okay, you want to make sure you are selecting the right category here, because depending on what you select, USCIS is going to want certain documentation. So if you select stepchild instead of, child born to parents married to each other, the documentation requirement is going to be different. Like USCIS is not going to be looking for a birth certificate to have that step parent's name on it, but they are going to be looking for a marriage certificate that shows that the marriage took place before the child turns 18. So the requirements are going to depend on what boxes you select. All right. So next up, you want to look at down here, if you're brothers and sisters, are you related by adoption? And if the answer is yes, you're going to be needing to include documentation showing that. And then over here, it asks, did you, the person filing for this, did you get your permanent residency or citizenship through adoption? This is an important question, because if the answer to this is yes, this means that your biological parents, siblings, cannot be included. Okay, so if you were adopted and you got your permanent residency or your citizenship through that adoption, you cannot file for your biological parents or siblings. Really important, and that's why that requirement is there. All of this information is about you. Do you have an A number? If you were born in the US, you do not have an A number. A stands for Alien Registration Number, okay? Alien Registration Number, this is for aliens, so people not born in the US. So if you're a US citizen, you do not have an alien number, but you will have a social security number or an online account number. You may also have a USCIS online account number if you already created an online account with USCIS. If you have not, then you may not have this already. It is not required for you to have that online account number in order to file, okay? And then if you have used any other names, aliases, maiden name, nicknames that USCIS could potentially have out there for you, or the government could potentially have out there for you, they want you to include it here. Why does that matter? Because they can use that to look up information about you. All right, you are filing a petition. They want to make sure that you qualify for the petition you're filing, and they want to make sure that they have all the names that they can potentially search for you under to make sure that you qualify for this petition that you are filing. All right. Next up, again, this is all about you. Where were you born? What's your date of birth? What's your gender? What's your sex? Okay. This is important. You do have to answer it. USCIS has not updated the forms to include any other, right, when it comes to sex. So you want to make sure you include that. Mailing address, you want to put where you want your mail to go. So for certain clients that travel a lot or are not, do not have a secure way of getting their mail, they can use our office address as their mailing address on these forms, and then we'll just put their physical address as their actual physical address, right? So you want to make sure that whatever you're putting here for the mailing address, you can actually get mail there, because USCIS is going to mail you the documents. If you create an online account and you're filing this online, USCIS will also send you the notice through your online account. But if you do not have an online account, you want to make sure that you are not only putting your address here, but updating your address if you move. All right. So you want to include your address for the past 5 years. So if you've moved a lot, this is going to be a little stressful to remember everywhere you lived and the dates that you lived there. Okay. They want the dates. So you want to include everywhere you have lived and the dates you lived there. And then how many times have you been married, right? What's your current marital status? This is not talking about your spouse, okay? This is about you. So your marital status as the spouse filing for, your wife, your husband that's outside of the US is married. Please. It's married. Even if your spouse is not in the US, it's still married. You are not separated just because your spouse is outside of the US. Before you're even asked, I've seen it. So I've seen people say that. So there's a reason that I have to do all that disclaimers. So the date that you and your spouse got married, where you got married, your spouse's full name. Okay, your spouse's full name. And then over here, it will say date marriage ended. You are still married to the spouse, so the marriage is not over. And I've seen people also put like the current date because they're not paying attention. Again, if you're working with me, you don't have to pay attention. We will pay attention for you, but this is important. So if you've been married more than once, you have to include your prior spouse's information, and then you're getting the date marriage ended from your divorce decree. Okay, that's coming directly from your divorce decree, not when you filed, but when the divorce became final. This is about your parents, their names, date of birth, their sex. If you do not know your parents' date of birth, if you don't know, it's okay to say you don't know, especially if your spouse, especially if your parent is deceased. Like there's no way for you to find out, then you can just say unknown. If you never knew your parent, you can also say unknown. Okay. So this is asking about country of birth. Where was your parent born? Where do they currently live? If they are deceased, you can put that in here, or you can leave it blank. So the same thing for both parents. Okay. Both parents. If you do not know, right? If there's no name on your birth certificate that shows both parents and it says like father unknown, you can, and you never knew who they are, you can just put unknown here. It's okay. It's okay. Over here, are you a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident? Again, this is how USCIS determines which queue to put your application into. So if you are a U.S. citizen, they know there's a visa immediately available. They just need to process your application and move on. If they see that you're a permanent resident, they're going to be looking at, okay, when is the visa going to become available? Are we going to prioritize this application? All of that stuff. So there's different things that happen if you're a U.S. citizen versus a permanent resident. And then they want to know how you got your citizenship. Were you born in the U.S.? Did you naturalize, or did you get it through your parents? And when I say get it through your parents, it means you got a CRBA, right? Consular Register of Birth Abroad. You got a certificate of citizenship, right? That kind of thing. You did not apply for citizenship You did not apply for naturalization. You got it because your parents were citizens. If you already got the certificate, you will say yes with your certificate number. So all of this will come from your citizenship certificate or your naturalization certificate. Okay, you are not like pulling these things out of nowhere. And then over here where it asks for the class of admission, that is from your permanent resident card. Okay, that is from your permanent resident card. You are not making this up. When you look on your permanent resident card, it's going to say category. Okay, there's a section that says category. You're going to look at that, and that's what you're going to put here for the class of admission. Please. Please. That's what that means. Don't say like spouse of a U.S. citizen or child of a U.S. citizen. That doesn't tell USCIS anything. If you say child of a U.S. citizen, it doesn't tell them if you were a married child, unmarried child, minor child. It doesn't tell them any of that. So the category is what they're looking for. And then all this information is going to come from your from your green card, okay? From your permanent resident card. Then over here, where did you get your permanent resident card? This is one that trips people up, but where did you live when you got your permanent resident card? Okay, that's kind of how we interpret that in my office. Then employment, you want your employment for the past 5 years, and this includes, you know, dates and your job title, please. Again, for the past 5 years, if you need to include additional pages, please do. Okay. Then it wants biographic information, your ethnicity, your race, height, weight, eye color, hair color. They want everything, okay? They want everything. So make sure you're including all of that. And then now you get to your spouse, right? All this information was about you, but now we get into your spouse. Again, do they have an A number? Do they have an online account number? Do they have a social security number? If your spouse is outside of the U.S., 9 times out of 10, they don't have any of this, and you just leave it blank. Like, it's just what it is. Don't feel like you have to put an answer at every single line, because some of these don't apply to you, and it's okay. All right, your spouse's full name. Have they used any other name? Where were they born? Date of birth, sex, all of that. Now, this is a question that you should be ready for. Has anyone else filed a petition for this beneficiary? Okay, has anyone else filed for this beneficiary? If the answer is yes, you say yes. If the answer is no, no. And if it's unknown, right, you put unknown. Only if, like USCIS makes it easy, only if you do not know and the beneficiary also does not know. Like, don't say, oh, I don't know, and leave it at that. Ask your spouse. And then if they don't know, like they're not sure, they don't know, then it's unknown. But don't just base it on your own understanding, okay? Ask your spouse. Your beneficiary's physical address. So where does your spouse currently live? All right, where do they currently live? Then over here, it's asking where they intend to live in the U.S. So they want to know where they currently live, where they plan to live in the U.S., and if they are currently in the U.S., do they have an address outside of the U.S.? Again, if your spouse is outside of the U.S., this question of physical address and this question of address outside the United States is going to be the same. And you can just put same if it is the same. Okay, if your spouse is physically in the U.S., but they also have an address, they own a home outside of the U.S. that they also can reside in, then you can put that here. Their phone number, their email, how many times they've been married. Again, the same questions they're asking about you, they're asking about your spouse. So be ready for that. Right? What's their current marital status? Where did they get married? When did they get married? Your spouse, their spouse's name. This will be you. Okay? Spouse number 1 will be you because you are the current spouse. And then if they've been married before, you would put their prior spouse's name. And then over here where it says information about beneficiary's family, this is a bit redundant for marriage-based cases, but what they're looking for here is for you to list your spouse's family, and that includes you. I've seen so many people miss that fact. Your spouse's family includes you. So you are the spouse. And then if they have children, you will include the children. But if they don't have children, this will just be you. And you will say spouse because that is your spouse. Okay? So important. And I know people miss that fact. And they give you a bunch of room. In case you have a lot of children or your spouse has children, you want to include it here. If you're a permanent resident and you're filing for your spouse and your spouse has minor children, it is so important that you make sure that you include it here. Make sure you confirm the date of birth and everything else, because once your spouse gets to the embassy stage, they are now able to include those children and also get them a visa. So that's why this part is so important. All right. So now if they have ever been in the U.S., you want to say yes or no. If they have never been in the U.S., you can basically skip the next few 46A to 46D. Okay, if they've never been in the U.S. But if they've ever been in the U.S., you want to make sure you are including that information here. Passport number, whether they've ever been in the U.S. or not, we need their passport number. All right. It's separate from that question about being in the U.S. So you want all this information is going to come from their passport. 48, 49, 50 comes directly from the passport. Okay. And then employment information. If they are currently employed, you want to make sure you put that. If they're not, you can just say unemployed, and when they became unemployed. If they've never worked in their life, you can just put their date of birth as the date they began their unemployment. All right. We do that a lot for minor children because it's just like, excuse me, this is a minor that's never worked. But yeah, for have they ever been in proceedings? Was the beneficiary ever in immigration proceedings? This requires them to have been in the U.S. at some point. To have been in immigration proceedings. So if they've never been in the U.S., 9 times out of 10, the answer to this is no. But if they have been in the U.S. and they have been in immigration proceedings, you will want to make sure that you say yes and have the documentation to show that they were in immigration court. So typically for our clients, we have all this documentation, we're reviewing it, making sure they actually qualify for either the green card to be filed in the U.S., outside of the U.S., or if they're going to need a waiver in between, we're determining that before we even file the I-130, because it is so important that everything you put on the I-130 is accurate. If I haven't said that already. It's really important that everything you put on this is accurate. So make sure you are getting the information, having documentation, looking at documentation when you are saying, oh yes, my spouse was never in immigration proceedings or they were in immigration proceedings. And this is even if that proceedings was terminated. Okay, you have to say yes, even if it was terminated. But if it was terminated in your spouse's favor, you want to make sure you have documentation for that. This is one where USCIS has now started really like asking for more, is the name, writing the name in the native written language of your spouse. So if it's not Roman letters, right? If it's not ABCD, you want to write it in that native written language. So let's say your spouse native written language is Arabic. You can write it in. If you're paper filing, you can write it in. If you are filing online, you need to create a separate sheet of paper where you write it and upload that. So really important, don't miss that. Really, really important. They've started really cracking down on that. And then over here, if you and your spouse live together in the US, you want to put that address and the dates that you've lived together. If you've never lived together, it's okay. If your spouse lives outside of the US, 9 times out of 10, you've never actually lived together. You may have visited each other, but you never actually lived together. So that is okay. You just need to say never lived together. And USCIS can still approve your I-130 even if you never lived together. So I know, but I have to say that because I've seen things. So over here, you want to really make sure that you are selecting where your spouse is going to apply for their green card. Is it going to be in the US or outside of the US? So if they're going to apply for their green card in the US, you need to put the USCIS office that's going to handle the green card application, okay? You need the USCIS field office, right? You need to know where it's located. For example, in Massachusetts, we have two. We have Lawrence, Massachusetts, and we have Boston, Massachusetts. So you need to know if you're in New York, you're going to have more than two. So it matters. And then if they're going to be applying from outside of the US, you want to make sure you're putting where the embassy is located. For example, if your spouse is in Ghana, it's going to be Accra, Ghana. If they're in Nigeria, most likely it's going to be Lagos, okay? If they're in Kenya, it's Nairobi. It's really important that you put that because if, let's say, you don't put anything for the embassy and nothing for the USCIS office, your file may end up with USCIS or the National Visa Center when that is not your intention, okay? So really important. Have you ever filed a petition for this beneficiary or any other alien? If you have filed before and it was denied or approved, or you withdrew the application, they want to know because typically they want to make sure you're telling, you're being honest, and they can look at your entire file to understand your whole application, okay? So, and then over here, if you're putting in separate petitions for other relatives, so let's say you're filing for your spouse, and also, their children, right? Your stepchildren, or your children, you can put that information here to show the relatives that are also being applied for. All right. So here, USCIS just wants to know that you are, that you actually can read and understand English, and you have understood every single question and you answered accurately. If you needed an interpreter, that you're in, who's your interpreter. If you had someone prepare your application for you, that they are including their name right here. So for our clients, we are always filling out this section with my name. Okay, for our clients, it's at my request, the preparer named in part 8. We're gonna go to part 8 to see what information it needs, and then my name. Prepare this petition for me based only upon information I provided or authorized. So we cannot fill this application out with any information that you don't give us, right? You have to give us the information. You have to authorize us to do anything that we put on your application. So that's really important. Every single time we finish an application, we're sending it over to our clients to review, to make sure everything is spelled correctly and the information is accurate. So, and sometimes the reason that I always do a review is because sometimes clients see the final filing and they remember something. Okay, they remember that one time that they may have had an immigration interaction that they're not sure what happened. Now they're coming back to me, and now we're talking about it, getting documentation about it, and we're able to see what the situation is. So that's why we always do a final review, and you know exactly what's in your application when it is going out. And we also put in our client portal, everything we file to USCIS. So over here is that part 8 where it will have the my contact information, right? And it will say I'm an attorney or accredited representative, and 9 times out of 10 my representation will extend beyond just preparing the forms, because preparing the forms is just like a part of it, but really representing you throughout the whole process is what you're paying for. So my representation typically extends beyond the preparation of the forms. If the person that's preparing your forms is not filling out this part 8, run. Run. If the person that's preparing your application is not giving you the forms to review before you sign, run. Okay? Because if you don't know what's in it, how can you defend it? Right? How can you really defend it? So it's really important that in this process that you are paying attention to who's helping you, how they're helping you, and making sure that you are getting proper representation. Listen, people miss this all the time. I have seen people that get requests for evidence that delays their case because they didn't include this. So it is so important that you make sure you include this, right? In my office, obviously, we prepare all the forms, we prepare the supporting documents, and make sure that everything that is required for the I-130, the I-130a, everything is included in your application so that you don't have to get an RFE just for the I-130a. Again, RFEs delay your process. So we want to make sure that we are not doing anything to delay that process. So again, your representative should be filling out this top part. If they're not filling it out, they're not recognized by DHS. Okay, so this is all about your spouse. This is not about you, the U.S. citizen or permanent resident. This is all about your spouse. So it's a shorter form. So let's get into it. First, do they have an alien number or USCIS online account number? If they don't, they don't. Okay. Their full name, their address history, so everywhere they have lived for the past 5 years. If they live outside of the U.S. and where they lived does not have a street number, street address, you want to get as close as possible to the description of where they live. Okay, so if all you guys city and state and country, okay, but if there's a street name but no number, that's okay too. So just put as much as you can as far as where they live, especially if they're outside of the US and there's no actual street number, right? And then again, everywhere they have lived for the past 5 years. If they're in the US and they've only lived in the US for the past 5 years, you go ahead and put that. And if they're in the US and they've only lived in the US for the past 5 years, you want to make sure that you are also putting in this part, right? The last place they lived outside of the US, okay, that they lived there for at least a year, okay? More than a year, you want to put that. So the last place that they physically lived outside of the US, you want to make sure you're putting that here and the dates that they lived there. Again, this is for USCIS to do their background checks. Okay, this is not, random information. They are asking these questions for a reason. Okay, the parents' names, date of birth, city of birth, country of birth. Okay, they are asking these questions for a reason. Okay, you want to do that for both parents. Now you get to employment. They want employment for the past 5 years. Remember I said if they're unemployed, you want to put when they became unemployed. You want to do that here too. On the I-130, they only ask for where your spouse currently works. On the I-130a, they want for the past 5 years. Okay? And then if they are in the U.S., have they worked outside of the US ever? And if they have, if it's not within the past 5 years, where was the last place they worked outside of the US? That's what this wants. Okay? And then that's it. That's it for the I-130A. Then they just want your spouse's phone number, email, and then the certification, their signature. They can understand this. Interpreters, preparers. Remember I said, if the preparer is not willing to put their information on the form, run. Okay? And then that's it. That's the I-130A. Again, people miss this. That's why I'm covering it. And you shouldn't miss it because, again, it will lead to a request for evidence and delay your case. All right. Now, why does any of this matter? Why are they asking about your parents' names and da 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 da? Where does that even? So they want to make sure they have all your information to do a background check. And then if you have an interview, they're going to use the information on this form to confirm that you actually know your spouse, because they already know your spouse's name, any other name they have ever had, if they have ever been married before, their parents' names, where their parents were born, is their parents alive, where do they live. They have all that information in here. They have all your information in here. So guess what's going to happen when you have your interview? The officer can just ask you questions based on your I-130 because they already know the answers. And if your answers don't match the information you voluntarily gave them, issues, red flags, and now you have to defend your marriage. So you want to make sure that everything you are putting in the I-130, in the I-130A is accurate and complete, and that you and your spouse are on the same page every single step of the way. And that is the I-130, I-130a forms, what information you need to include, and everything else that, comes up as you're filling that out. If you are looking at this and you're like, Lily, save me some time, energy, use your almost 10 years of knowledge to do this for me so I don't have to worry about it, go ahead and schedule a strategy session with me so that I can help you with every single step of the way. Okay, you should not have to do this on your own. That's what I'm here for. Reach out, schedule that strategy session. You can do it by going to my website, lilylegal.com, and clicking on contact us and schedule a date and time that works best for you for us to speak. You can also call my office at 508-443-1788. Okay.